Welcome to Indonesia Security Focus, your monthly audio briefing that distills the key security developments from the latest country analysis. I'm Kaede, and today we're covering July 2025. This month's data highlights what's being called a perfect storm, converging security crises that exposed systemic vulnerabilities across multiple domains. We're talking about catastrophic maritime disasters, at least 25 lives lost, major cybersecurity breaches targeting Indonesia's financial sector, environmental crimes that sparked regional diplomatic tensions, and perhaps most significantly, controversial military law amendments that triggered nationwide protests and raised serious questions about democratic governance. In this episode, drawing directly from the detailed monthly investigation, we'll explore the latest terrorism and extremism developments. We'll analyze alarming crime trends in tourism hubs. We'll delve into transnational security challenges. We'll assess the government's comprehensive institutional responses. And we'll examine a special deep dive into Indonesia's cybersecurity infrastructure revolution. We'll also look ahead, what's next on the horizon. Let's get started. The security landscape in July 2025 is characterized as a critical juncture for Indonesia's security. It's marked by what are described as converging crises that exposed systemic vulnerabilities across multiple domains. Here's what defined this month. Several major themes emerged from the assessment. First, critical infrastructure vulnerabilities exposed across both physical and digital domains. Think ferry disasters highlighting chronic maritime safety failures or sophisticated cyber attacks on major securities firms. Second, there's a clear pattern of transnational challenges requiring multilateral responses. Whether it's environmental crimes affecting regional neighbors or international criminal networks exploiting tourism infrastructure. Third, and perhaps most concerning, what appears to be systematic restrictions on civil space, alongside controversial expansions of military roles in civilian governance, were documented. The evidence highlights maritime safety and cybersecurity as areas requiring immediate attention. The KMP Tunu Pratama Jaya sinking on July 2nd and the KM Barcelona 5 fire on July 20th, they weren't just isolated incidents. They represented chronic regulatory failures in a critical transportation sector. Meanwhile, the breaches at NH Corindo Securitas and Trimega Securitas, with the latter losing an estimated $12.3 million, exposed vulnerabilities that could destabilize economic confidence. What was particularly telling this month? The interconnected nature of these challenges. Environmental crimes in Riau province didn't just threaten local ecosystems. The resulting transboundary haze created immediate diplomatic tensions with Malaysia and Singapore. Similarly, expanding TNI roles through controversial law amendments wasn't merely a domestic governance issue. It attracted international attention from democracy organizations and potentially affects Indonesia's standing in governance-focused multilateral forums. This convergence of crises tested Indonesia's institutional resilience. It highlighted the complex balance between security imperatives and democratic governance principles. Let's start with terrorism and extremism. Significant institutional development in Indonesia's counterterrorism architecture is detailed, despite no major attacks occurring in July. On July 15th, Indonesia co-hosted a virtual global counterterrorism forum workshop with Australia and the Hedaya Center. The focus: artificial intelligence challenges in countering violent extremism. This initiative reflected what is described as Indonesia's proactive approach to technology-enabled threats and online radicalization spaces. At the same time, BNPT accelerated plans for the National Preparedness Center in West Jakarta. It's designed as a coordination hub for counter-radicalization, rehabilitation of terror convicts, and interagency cooperation. This facility represents a strategic shift toward integrated prevention and reintegration approaches, moving beyond traditional security responses. Now, on the crime front, comprehensive monthly crime rate data wasn't officially released by Polri for July 2025. This prevented a usual quantitative analysis of national crime patterns. However, deeply concerning qualitative trends were identified, particularly in high tourism areas. Bali experienced what is described as a surge in crimes involving foreign nationals. Think fatal shootings, drug trafficking, sophisticated scams. Indonesian authorities arrested a Brazilian man and South African woman for cocaine smuggling attempts. Courts sentenced British and Argentine nationals to prison terms ranging from 1 to 7 years for drug-related offenses. An analysis of incident data shows the concentration of criminal activity in tourism-heavy areas suggests a correlation between international visitor flows and certain crime categories. This indicates potential gaps in law enforcement capabilities and immigration vetting processes. Maritime security dominated public safety concerns with multiple fatal incidents. The KMP Tunu Pratama Jaya capsized in the Bali Strait on July 2nd, killing at least 19 people, with 16 missing. On July 20th, the KM Barcelona 5 caught fire near North Sulawesi, resulting in additional casualties despite rescue efforts for over 500 passengers. A speedboat capsizing near Mentawai Islands on July 14th was also documented, though all 18 passengers were rescued. In terms of civil unrest, the TNI law amendments prompted sustained nationwide protests throughout July. Civil society organizations challenged the expansion of military roles in civilian agencies. Crucially, systematic targeting of activists and students is highlighted. Contra S documented 42 forced police dispersals nationwide between July 2024 and June 2025, with approximately 1,000 victims, including journalists facing harassment and surveillance. A deep dive into digital and information security reveals unprecedented breaches at major Indonesian securities firms. This exposed critical vulnerabilities in financial infrastructure and raised serious concerns about economic security. The systematic nature of these attacks suggests, according to analysis, state-sponsored or highly organized criminal elements. They're possibly seeking economic intelligence or preparing for larger destabilization efforts. Beyond Indonesia's borders, how are regional events influencing its security? This month's assessment unpacks several critical transnational dynamics that shaped July's security environment. A meticulous analysis reveals how external factors are shaping Indonesia's internal security. This month, the Riau forest fire crisis carried immediate diplomatic implications as transboundary haze affected Malaysia and Singapore. It tested ASEAN mechanisms for environmental cooperation. What makes this particularly significant, according to analysis? Domestic enforcement gaps created regional diplomatic tensions. Essentially, Indonesia's internal environmental crimes became external security challenges. Counterterrorism cooperation advanced significantly through the Global Counterterrorism Forum workshop on AI and extremism. This demonstrates what is described as Indonesia's commitment to partnerships beyond traditional ASEAN frameworks. It reflects a recognition that modern security threats, particularly those enabled by technology, require multilateral responses that transcend regional boundaries. Indonesia's expanding bilateral security engagements are also tracked. Enhanced cybersecurity cooperation with Singapore advanced throughout July, including information sharing agreements and joint threat assessment protocols. This bilateral partnership is positioned as reflecting a recognition that cyber threats require multinational responses. It establishes precedents for broader regional cyber cooperation. Furthermore, cross-border challenges continue to impact the nation significantly. The involvement of foreign nationals in criminal activities, particularly the drug trafficking cases in Bali involving Brazilian, South African, British, and Argentine nationals, demonstrates Indonesia's integration into what are called transnational criminal networks requiring enhanced international law enforcement cooperation. The controversial TNI law amendments attracted international attention from democracy organizations. This potentially affects Indonesia's standing in governance-focused multilateral forums. Regional partners expressed concerns about implications for democratic trajectory and civil-military relations, indicating that domestic governance decisions have immediate external security consequences. Maritime security challenges highlighted by the ferry disasters affected not only domestic transportation, but also international confidence in Indonesian infrastructure, supporting regional trade flows. When basic transportation safety fails, it undermines broader economic security relationships with regional partners. While no major ASEAN defense ministers meeting or Shangri-La dialogue outcomes were specifically referenced for July 2025, Indonesia maintained active participation in regional security frameworks. The emphasis on technological cooperation in counterterrorism and cybersecurity suggests Indonesia is positioning itself as a regional leader in next-generation security challenges. The interconnected nature of these challenges, where domestic environmental crimes create regional diplomatic tensions, local governance changes attract international democracy concerns, and national infrastructure failures affect regional economic confidence, illustrates what is described as Indonesia's position at the nexus of transnational threats requiring enhanced multilateral cooperation. That's the strategic reality being dealt with. So, how is Indonesia's security apparatus responding? The evidence indicates a government implementing significant policy changes and institutional reforms, though not without controversy. The most significant development: the controversial TNI law amendments permitting active-duty military personnel to hold civilian agency positions. This legislation, according to analysis, represented a fundamental shift in civil-military relations, raising concerns about democratic oversight and Duifengsi doctrine revival. However, the government also demonstrated remarkable responsiveness to emerging threats. Cybersecurity governance underwent what is described as major restructuring, with BSSN's elevation to ministry-equivalent status and the enactment of the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill. The creation of regional cybercrime directorates demonstrated recognition that cyber threats require both centralized coordination and localized response capabilities. Environmental enforcement showed unprecedented vigor with 44 arrests linked to Riau forest fires, combined with cloud seeding countermeasures. This operation is characterized as demonstrating enhanced government commitment to addressing environmental crimes with regional implications. Significant institutional developments are also noted. BNPT advanced infrastructure development with the National Preparedness Center project, reflecting what is described as comprehensive approaches to terrorism prevention beyond traditional security responses. The facility design emphasizes counter-radicalization, rehabilitation, and interagency coordination. Maritime safety responses included urgent reviews of vessel inspection protocols and emergency response capabilities following the ferry disasters. However, systematic reforms addressing root causes of maritime safety failures remained in early planning stages. The assessment of interagency coordination effectiveness reveals mixed results. While cybersecurity reforms demonstrated impressive coordination across multiple agencies, the controversial nature of TNI law amendments suggests significant internal disagreements about appropriate security responses. Public perception of security forces, according to the findings, became increasingly polarized around questions of democratic governance versus security effectiveness. Now for a closer look at a critical issue. This month's special feature investigates what's being called Indonesia's cybersecurity infrastructure revolution. Each month, a deep dive into one critical security issue is featured. This month, the focus was on the unprecedented transformation of Indonesia's cybersecurity architecture. It's driven by what analysis describes as unprecedented threat escalation targeting critical infrastructure. The breaches at major securities firms weren't just isolated incidents. Investigation reveals they exposed vulnerabilities that could destabilize economic confidence and provide avenues for economic espionage. The attack on NH, Corindo Securitas and Trimega Securitas, with the latter losing $12.3 million, represented what analysis suggests were systematic targeting rather than opportunistic attacks. Research provides deeper context, examining the underlying drivers behind the government's response. The Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill represents what is called the most significant cyber governance legislation since the Electronic Information and Transactions Law. It establishes comprehensive frameworks for threat detection, incident response, and public-private cooperation. BSSN's elevation to ministry-equivalent status enables direct presidential access for cyber threat briefings and enhanced interagency coordination authority. The simultaneous creation of regional cybercrime directorates addresses what are identified as geographic distribution challenges inherent in cyber threat response. Particularly significant is the Singapore Partnership expansion, which analysis describes as reflecting sophisticated understanding that cyber threats transcend borders and require multilateral responses. Information sharing agreements and joint threat assessment protocols establish precedents for broader regional cyber cooperation. Assessing the effectiveness of current approaches, it's highlighted that while prevention through enhanced monitoring and rapid incident response capabilities have been strengthened, gaps remain in private sector cybersecurity, standards enforcement, and international cooperation beyond Singapore. The sophistication of recent attacks suggests, according to analysis, coordinated campaigns indicating state-sponsored or highly organized criminal activity. This is the new reality. What should you keep an eye on in the coming weeks? The evidence points to several high-probability security challenges requiring strategic attention. Based on an analysis of emerging patterns, concerning trends across multiple security domains are identified. Maritime safety incidents showed geographical clustering around high-traffic routes, with weather-related vulnerabilities exposing inadequate safety protocols. Environmental crimes demonstrated how domestic enforcement gaps create regional diplomatic tensions. Most concerning. Cybersecurity threats showed increasing sophistication and sector-specific targeting, particularly of financial infrastructure. Several potential triggers are flagged as early warning signals. Civil space restrictions demonstrated systematic characteristics across multiple provinces, suggesting coordinated policy implementation rather than localized responses. The targeting of students, activists, and journalists indicates what are described as institutional approaches to dissent management that could escalate social tensions. Looking ahead, a forecast projects several specific developments anticipated in the coming month. Maritime safety incidents are likely to continue given monsoon conditions and persistent infrastructure vulnerabilities, with potential for major casualties affecting tourism confidence. Environmental enforcement in Rio may face sustainability challenges without addressing underlying economic incentives for illegal burning. This could potentially lead to renewed transboundary haze during dry season transitions. Cybersecurity threats will probably escalate as adversaries test newly implemented defense systems. Financial sector targeting may expand to other critical infrastructure, requiring sustained vigilance and international cooperation. The strategic implications of current trends, as outlined in the assessment, suggest potential erosion of democratic governance reputation affecting international partnerships. Regional leadership credibility challenges if environmental enforcement proves unsustainable. Tourism sector vulnerabilities if safety concerns persist. Maritime safety compliance, cybersecurity threat evolution, forest fire prevention implementation, and civil society adaptation to expanded military roles in governance will be closely monitored. The risk assessment matrix rates maritime safety incidents and transnational crime as high likelihood, with cybersecurity breaches and environmental crimes as medium likelihood, but high impact scenarios. Stay vigilant. So, to recap the main takeaways from this month's Indonesia security analysis. First, July 2025 represented a critical convergence of security crises, that exposed systemic vulnerabilities across maritime safety, cybersecurity, and environmental enforcement. These challenges require immediate institutional attention and regional cooperation. Second, the controversial expansion of military roles in civilian governance through TNI law amendments has created significant tensions between security imperatives and democratic principles, with implications extending beyond Indonesia's borders. And finally, the sophistication of cyber threats targeting financial infrastructure, combined with transnational criminal networks exploiting tourism sectors, demonstrates that Indonesia's security challenges increasingly require multilateral responses and enhanced international cooperation. Thank you for joining Indonesia Security Focus. We'll be back next month with further analysis as Indonesia navigates these complex security challenges. Subscribe to stay updated, and until next time, stay informed and stay safe. This is Kaede, signing off.